Hello and welcome to part 4 of the Unreal Return to Pali Perfect walkthrough. Right now we are on the map Spire Valley by authors Nivlik and a bunch of vehicles. This map is somewhat of a passage map, and I've decided that although it is somewhat larger than what you would think a passage map is in terms of actual space, it doesn't contain the detail that acts as a prerequisite for being viewed. I will comment on the appearance of the map though, as it is one of those maps that sort of has a perfect Unreal style outside world with everything included, the atmosphere referencing the music and aura, and the environment. Just pointing out that this would be an ideal map of something a mapper would aim for in terms of those two aspects. Anyway, I don't think I commented on the combat assault rifle in the previous part, as I said I would. And if I did, consider this a simple reiteration of those collections of hints. The combat assault rifle, in my opinion, is the most useful addition to the Unreal weapon stock, not so much for its damage or something you'd think it might be. What's actually very useful, and you'll notice this if you have a skilled hand, that is to say, good aim or good accuracy. The combat assault rifle has a pushback or applies force to the target as no other weapon really does. You can't quite compare this to, for example, the minigun, either in Unreal Tournament or Unreal, for instance, although the former does generate a similar effect, though because it does much greater damage, your target usually dies before it is noticed. There is a variable in the weapon superclass script that handles the basis of this sort of thing, and whether there was additional code or not added to the combat assault rifle. You can actually sort of manipulate the target, or more accurately put, control his positioning, so long as you maintain your accuracy and fire on the target. For instance, as you saw in the previous walkthrough part, or perhaps even here when I keep my aim steady and fire at a target, it cannot move forward. That is, when I fire at a target with the combat assault rifle. And even more useful is the fact that it prevents your target from doing anything at all except attempting to move. The Marines I've killed were never able to fire their weapon so long as I kept my line of fire on them. I think if you know this as a player, you'll use it to your advantage. There are actually times when I've pawned bridges and such things by moving my fire to the left or to the right slightly to sort of push them one way or the other with the combat assault rifle. That's just a hint in case you might have needed it.
Life was hard, then it got harder. I hate Titans.
Now this map, Nagomi Pass by Nivlik and Juan Pancho once more, is an interesting map because it acts as a means of transport from the main maps, from one main map to the other, and is sort of a hybrid between an actual map and a passage map. And I say that because there isn't enough detail to say, well, I can say something about this map, but it isn't really much of a map with substance, and it's obvious it's just really intended to as a logical or practical medium of transport between, you know, as I said, the main maps. The interesting part of this is that this map is used more than once to get the player from one point to the other. As in, first, the main character goes to the upcoming Temple of Vandora. Afterwards, the character goes to, I believe, the Foundry, the plant nearby, which is sort of odd because it doesn't seem as if the main character knows where he's going, but at the same time, you can't really say much of his choices because he knows obviously where the ship is. He knows it's in a castle, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, how does he know how to get there? And is he just wandering, throughout this sort of maze of levels? Or is it just coincidence that he finds his way through the Foundry and into the castle? Now the upcoming Foundry, I'm not going to say much of it, other than the fact that it is one of the most complicated, more complex maps of Unreal Return to Pali, which is funny because in general, Return to Pali was sort of rushed halfway. You may notice in some maps they are very detailed, oddly enough. Other maps, some of which are coming up, some of which we've already seen, are very much rushed, and it sort of sends a message to the player as to, well, what's going on here. Because if you didn't know, some of the Return to Pali maps were taken from what was meant to be part of the original Unreal that didn't make it into the game. So, in one sense, Return to Pali is a compilation of rushed maps, very detailed maps, and maps that did not make it into the original Unreal. And this gives occasion to many actual real levels instead of passage maps, but again, a lot of those real levels are rushed, which is unfortunate. I remember when this game was, if I recall, $40 or $50 on the market when it was just released, and I find it funny that people did not really realize, except perhaps for the more keen critics and mappers and whatnot, that half of this game was really rushed, to get it out there.
The trek to the other shuttle has become a real endurance test. I don't have much to record right now. Just staying alive takes all my energy.
Now we're on the map Velora Temple by none other than Jean-Claude. If you don't know the significance of this, Jean-Claude is the same designer who created the map Temple of Vandora in the original Unreal. This is convenient both for him, for the reviewer, and for the player, really. I mean, I'd rather have someone experienced in making this sort of environment, an ancient ruined temple, and even more so someone who's good at it. I would firstly like to compare this map with a few of the notable or iconic bases of imagery, so to speak, from Temple of Vandora. I'd also like to reckon which of the two is superior by comparison, but first, before that, let's review this map. Velora Temple takes in a sort of atmosphere nearly identical to that of Vandora. There is also the darkness that sort of engulfs the rooms regardless of the amount of lighting, though some areas are an exception to this. I'm going to point out first the method of review here, again. Now, like I just said, the atmosphere is similar to Vandora. The music is the same, which is not at all a problem, and in fact is very fitting. The environment does add well to the atmosphere, or at least it does not lose track of it. By which I mean to say that it is not an insecure map in terms of personality, if you will. Jean-Claude knew what he wanted and made what he wanted, and the map does not attempt to become something it is not. I want to capitalize here on what I said in part 3 and answer the two questions I liken to be the basis of good atmosphere. First, do I feel different because of the sounds and scenes? Certainly. I hear creaks and rumbles around me, water, etc., combined with the apparent worn-down imagery that is grungy only by its implicated agent. It makes it creepier, not scarier, but creepier, if you will. And I can describe my surroundings in one or two words, yes, which are arcane ruins. There you go. So for atmosphere, Jean-Claude does well enough, though it's not awing, such that he gives the map a clear personality. Unfortunately, not so much can be said for conceptual grandness. While there are some rooms throughout the map that seem to attempt to manifest a sense of awe, they don't do a very good job of it. For instance, the area with the large pit of water and the two bridges on either side has the concept behind it, but not so much the grandness. That is, yes, it's big, but it is not emphasized. It doesn't stand out. The player simply walks past it without stopping to see the sights. And wait a minute, let me point that out a bit. That's one big hint to discerning the conceptual grandness of a map. If a player decides to stop on his or her own to enjoy the sight of something, that shows that the mapper has done a good job of implementing conceptual grandness. It's awing enough that someone has to actually stop and appreciate the view. That's the visual aspect of conceptual grandness. But in terms of the grand scheme of things, the entire map as an innovation, sorry, there's none of it here. There isn't much innovation, and the obvious implication regarding the map, which can be seen in retrospect from playing Vandora, that there are a few new things, but they don't really add up to anything big, like the traps and the more intricate style of design. Visual impact is a plus here, though, because while there might not be anything necessarily innovative, it seems that Claude, in a sense, all but capitalized on Vandora by creating a seemly collection of scenes. Although the map isn't detailed to an excellent level, it is certainly more than acceptable. In terms of architecture, even more so. It's a huge plus when you notice more complex architecture than that of Vandora. I especially like the complex brushes such as the faces and the well area, or the areas that are well lit so that you can actually appreciate the possible details. Gameplay is also rather balanced here, and perhaps a little more so on the heavy side, which is a good thing in my opinion. There are a variety of monsters ranging from spiders to crawlers to brutes to scar, and they are often placed in nice areas. You have to keep on your toes to avoid being thrashed about by scar here and there, placed systematically in places for the purpose of being subterfuge and such things. Flux is moderate in Velora, certainly not to the extent of clairvoyance, which is superfluous really. But the map allows the player enough guidance that he is not especially lost, but not enough to give up easily on the right way to go and whatnot. Unfortunately for storyline implementation, we've come to a lacking map. There are only 2 translator events. Again, I ensured and affirmed this in Unreal Editor, and neither of them contribute much to any sort of story. The setting itself is not too much a medium of conveying storyline, though it is understood that the main character is simply looking for the right way to go, but even the voice line doesn't contribute much to the storyline. So here we go. Atmosphere I give a 4, conceptual grandness a 2, visual impact 4, gameplay 4, and storyline implementation 1, which gives us an overall rating of 3 out of 5. I sort of expected this map to be more, but it is an acceptable rating. Temple of Vandora actually had a 3.2 rating, and the ratings are funnily enough nearly exactly the same. I promise I didn't even remember what I rated Vandora before reviewing this. The only difference is that in Vandora, conceptual grandness had earned a 3, here it earned a 2. If you notice though, some of the more apparent areas that stand out are, for instance, the theater with the Titan in Vandora, or the area with the purple fire urn, as opposed to a more narrowed map referring to Velora. Vandora had a better sense of flux and conceptual grandness, but Velora had the superior visuals and architecture. Now here I'd like to point out a few things, give you a few tips on the 2 traps set here. The first one you just saw, and what I actually did fail it a few times during these recordings, but it's not as complicated as it seems. Most people actually just overcomplicate it, which makes it seem harder. Basically, you just have to do a double jump. The easiest way, rather, is a double jump, or double tap, forward jump. And you have to do this as it closes. As it closes completely, that's when you do it. So when you're jumping when it opens, and therefore it doesn't have much of a chance to close on you as you get through. Now the next one is coming up, which is a much larger trap, but this one is actually not as hard as the one you just saw. And you can actually, as you probably will see me attempt, you can actually try to trap a few Scar or other enemies in between those 2 cleavers to sort of, lure them into that trap. But what you do for that is just, as it closes, once it begins opening, that's when you go forward. You go through the trap and you shouldn't be harmed at all. There are also a few points, a few areas that I might not have gone through the walkthrough if I don't show them in the video. There is one area, which is here, where I'm at, which is the bridge above the lava, and somewhere around there is a shield. I don't think that I got it, but it is up on either the left or right side of the bridge.
I'm glad I made it out of there. I'm used to being bitten, hacked, shot, stabbed, or blown up. But in there I could have been crushed, sliced, diced, burned, or skewered. Whoever built that place must have been a real sadist. I'm still slogging along. This is a marathon, not a sprint.
Tired of doubling back so often. Every time I make some progress, it seems I have to jump through hoops just to stay even. I know I'm getting there, but it's tough going. 2 steps forward, 1 step back.